what would you say is like a first step for someone that's listening that like they know they have this problem and they're like, man, what's my first step? Like, is it admission to themselves? Is it admitting to their wife? Like, what do you think is the good first step along this process?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So when I talk to people, so I've got a podcast, and the podcast is about helping couples overcome addiction. And so I use the word addiction, but I guess I use it really loosely because I'm not super concerned with the verbiage. Whether it's an addiction or a habit or a pattern, there's a couple different ways to approach this. There's like a really traditional way, which is it's like the 12 step. You admit that you're an addict and you're powerless and you're going to deal with this for the rest of your life. And so without having struggled personally, I just thought like that was my original training when I was back in like 2012. It was like very much this is the struggle, and you have to manage your temptations. And so I thought like, okay, like I guess this is how you do it. And so after about a year of doing groups with people, we would have the same conversations every single week, and I would give them like ideas and tools and stuff, and then they'd come back and say like I'm still struggling. I just thought there's got to be a better way to do this. And so after going to tons of seminars and trainings, and like I'm looking for every tool I possibly can find to help people, I figured out there's a different way to do this that doesn't involve saying that you're powerless. It doesn't involve having to use willpower and discipline. It's a totally different approach. Instead of managing the temptation, my whole goal, so you're going back to your question, what's the first step, is to help people understand what are their triggers, what's driving this. Because if they're on the spectrum of addiction, whether it's like, again, habit or a compulsion or like a full-on addiction, it's all coming from the same place. There's some underlying reason why they're turning to it. And if they don't know what that is, and if they're trying to stop, because some people don't care and they watch it, it's not that big of a deal to them. But the people that I work with, they want to overcome this and they just don't know how. And so step number one is to figure out what is underneath this, what's driving it, what are your triggers, because once you understand what those things are, then you can craft a plan to address those things directly instead of just trying to will yourself through temptation or try to avoid triggering situations. The goal is to really understand yourself better because once you do, that maps the path out of that spiral because the triggers have so much information. And yeah, we can talk more about that as well, but I think that's the first step, is really help people get clear about why they're doing it in the first place.
Sure. Yeah, like whether it's you're scrolling on your phone alone in your room because you're bored, or it's you're watching that show that you maybe shouldn't because there's too many, triggers on it, or those are probably two big ones, at least in my experience. And like, I've kind of been thinking like, there's like, why have you put yourself in that position? Oh, because I'm bored. Why are you bored? Well, because I don't really have anything else going on in my life. Or like, you normally can get to a root of like, why is this porn occurring? It's not because you just really love watching porn. It's like, it's maybe because, you're replacing it for a feeling of loneliness, sadness, missing human connection, boredom. I'm just trying, me, myself, as a 22-year-old, trying to figure out why was it such a problem for me. And I've helped some people along the path of like, understand your addiction and why is it or not addiction, understand your trigger and why is this trigger coming to you in this moment? How can you change your environment? How can you change the way that you're going to act the next time this environment comes up? Like, yeah, I'm thinking exactly out loud.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. I believe the same thing. And what I find is the people who are most successful don't just approach a situation, slip up, just tell themselves, I'm going to do better next time, or they recommit or promise to themselves like, okay, I'm really going to try harder. The answer isn't to try harder. The answer is to figure out how do you do it differently. Mm-hmm. Because if you just keep trying harder, you're not addressing why it's happening in the first place. You're just getting triggered. Most people get triggered by the same thing over and over again, and they don't develop a plan. They don't have any awareness. They can't really address it, what's on the deeper level, until you start to pay attention to and look for that. Because once you do, like you said, like that's how people get out of it. Because if they're bored, then there's a way to resolve that. If there's loneliness, again, there's connection's the antidote. Mm-hmm. If people are stressed, again, there's ways to counteract the stress. So there's so many different tools that people have that are available once they understand what the triggers actually are.
Yeah, no, it's a great point.